Good day and welcome to today's class. I am Tokbayo Motiri, and on behalf of Koyo Olabi, I will be treating the course outline. Subsequently, you'll be taking some topics in the class. But basically, there are areas that I will be coming in to take the class, particularly when it comes to the area of philosophy of history and issues that relates to the problems in discussing the theories of historical explanation. The class, as you already have been told online, will be coming up twice in a week. The class also is going to be a paid one beginning from next week. Every student is expected to pay 480 naira per week. The class is going to expose you to all the topics you'll be taking in your 200 level history. So we want to believe that as you have joined, you are going to be benefiting more from the Google Classroom, because we will be using both Google Classroom and Zoom to teach you. The lessons will be virtually aired. So the next class is going to be live, where you as a student will join in discussing together the issues that will be raised. Quickly, let's go to the course outline for today. We have philosophy of history. We'll be looking at the philosophy of history, the definitions given to the philosophy of history. We'll also be looking at the major theories of historical explanation. And so, the theories of history that you have known before will be expounded upon, particularly those relating to great God theory, the great man theory, the great mind theory, the Mazix theory. All of these theories will be looked into. We want to see how these theories are used in historical explanation. The next one is going to be on objectivity, subjectivity, determinism, and contingency theories in history. We want to see how objective a historian can be. How far can objectivity be achieved in history? Many of us who went through the teachings of Professor Ajetomobi are quite well aware of what we mean by objectivity in history. He once told us a story of being in the class, and he eventually was penalized for saying a historian can never be totally objective. And so today, as a professor in history, he has written a lot of materials. He has written a lot of books on historical objectivity. If there is no objectivity in history, then the field of history is useless. And so we'll be looking at objectivity, subjectivity, determinism. Determinism is the opposite of contingency. So we want to look at how history is being explained from these angles. The third one is going to be on the sources of history, and we'll be looking at the oral tradition. Under the oral tradition, we have folklore, legends, we have songs, poetry, poems, names of streets, names of places, names of towns, people. So we're going to be looking at these oral traditions and how they are being used to rewrite or reconstruct the history of African people. We're also going to be looking at the written sources. Under the written sources, we have different mode of writings. There are those that relate to archival documents, and there are those relating to normal textbooks, normal books, and journal articles. So we're going to be looking at this, and also the use of artifacts in history. How useful are artifacts in historical reconstruction? And lastly, we're going to be talking about digital sources in history. Digital sources are recently being used to explain new trends in contemporary history. And so even some schools have gone ahead to digitize some of the documents that could be used to reconstruct the past. The last one is going to be on history and other disciplines. History and other disciplines. We want to see, is history a science We ask the question, is history an art? And what is the relationship between history and the social sciences? What is the relationship between history and linguistics? What's the relationship between history and other fields in geology? So we want to see the benefits of these departments to the field of history. The next major theme we'll be looking at is African history from 1800 up to 1900. We'll be looking at the economies of the transatlantic slave trade. In your 100 level, you have been told about the trans-Saharan trade, but in the 200 level now, we want to look deeply into the patterns of the triangular trade that occurred during beginning from the 1500 up to the 19th century. So we'll be looking at this, and the next one is going to be on Islam and West African jihads of the 19th century. In particular, you'll be looking at the ones of the 1804 jihad, Ottoman Danfodio jihad, and the implications of these jihad movements to the transformation of West African societies. So the next one is the Christian missionary activities in Africa. We will be looking at the major church missions that went and contributed to the rise of Christianity across the continent. In particular, we'll be looking at the one on the CMS. We'll be looking at the Anglican Church. We'll be looking at the Methodist Church. We'll be looking at even the Catholic Church, and the activities of these missionaries and how they contributed to the colonization of African society. We were told in history that the Christian missionaries came with a Bible and at the same time a plow. They taught us how to believe in God, and at the same time they took our resources. And so they helped in the colonization of African people. So we want to look at their roles and the impact of Christian missionary activities in Africa. The last one under this theme is going to be the scramble for and the partitioning of Africa. In particular, what role did German Otto von Bismarck play in the scramble for Africa? Many of us are aware about the Berlin Conference. So we want to see the impact of this conference in the balkanization of African territories. We want to see how the partitioning of African countries, African states, contributed to the underdevelopment of the continent in the future. So the next one is the themes in European and American history up to 1919. First, we are going to be looking at the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, in this sense, means the technological change that occurred in Europe, beginning from Britain and going to France and then to other parts of Europe, and before it exploded to other parts of the world. The revolution did not stop, and it moved on to change the whole of Europe, including the abolition of the slave trade. So we're going to be looking at that. Then we'll be looking at a different thing entirely, and that is the meaning of diplomacy and international law since the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. So we want to see the way treaties were being made beginning from that period, and now treaties have changed the environment, the international environment. The next one is going to be on the French Revolution as well as the Russian Revolution. So these revolutions will be examined and the impact they had on the people in subsequent years. Next is the American War of Independence. The American War of Independence is going to be examined. We're going to be looking at major themes in the American War of Independence and the major actors, major places, and major issues that led to the American War of Independence and how it was fought, how it was won, and how it contributed to the American idea of freedom today. So the last one on that particular one is going to be on the First World War. We have actually selected some of these themes to cut across many departments across the country. So the First World War is going to be examined. We're going to be looking at the build up of the First World into the First World War beginning from the late 1900. So we want to see what happened between 1900 and 1914. They want to see why this war broke out. Why would the killing of a single man, Archduke Ferdinand, lead to a major war? We want to see and examine the issue of militarism. We want to see and examine the issue related to alliances, and the idea of you taking over some other territories. So how did all of this contribute to the outbreak of the First World War? What impact did the First World War have in world history? We want to see the end of the First World War and the emergence of the League of Nations. So this will be examined together with other teams in European and American history up to 1919. The next one is going to be on the economic history of Nigeria in the 19th century. We'll look at the units of production and distribution. We're going to be looking at the international trade relations. We're going to be looking at the economies of the transatlantic slave trade, although we have looked at that earlier. But how did this impact the Nigerian society? We'll be looking at the market sector and the transportation system. So we'll be looking at the mode of transportation and the importance of marketplaces in economic history of Nigeria in the 19th century. The last one is going to be the history of East, Central, Southern Africa up to 1900. History of East, Central, and Southern Africa up to 1900. We'll be looking at the state formation, especially among the Bushmen, the Otentos, and the Bantu. We'll be looking at Swahili culture. We'll be looking at the Arabs and the European invasion of these territories. Then the Mfikane trek and the Great Trek. So all of this will be examined one after the other. Once again, I am Omotere Tokwe, and together with Kuye Olabi, we'll be looking at this theme that we have identified. We expect you to join the next class, which is going to be live on Zoom, and we also expect you to tell your friends about your particular course. 200 level history students. I am going to meet you well, and I believe by the time we come together in the Zoom class, we're going to be treating your exam questions. We'll be asked, we allow you to ask questions, and we answer you. Share ideas with other students in the class. So I will be waiting for you. So the next thing to do now is to go to your Google Classroom and do the assignment that I've given to you, and that is actually dealing with the philosophy of history. Have a nice day. I will be expecting you in the next class. Thank you.